What's up, everybody? Welcome to Sales Remastered. I appreciate you guys. I see you guys checking in on the chat box, and I'm going to actually include a chat box so you guys can engage inside this live stream. As you guys already know, today is going to be dedicated around the topic of sales objections, and I'm excited to bring this out because I think that, in my personal opinion, I believe that objections is one of the primary reasons as to why salespeople don't become good salespeople, is because they're too mentally focused on the difficulty of handling objections, primarily because we have this stigma about sales objections of it being a form of rejection. And my goal in today's live stream is to actually help you guys out in figuring a way to change your outlook in sales objections itself. Let me go and make sure I'm straight. There you go. All right. So what's up, everybody? I'm excited because the content that I'm producing on these live streams, it's getting better and better. With the more I practice and the more repetition, the better it evolves and the more advanced it gets and actually delivering good content. If you remember, for those of you who've seen the original live streams, the sound was off, right? But just like anything in life, I think that after repetition and really studying your craft and using the resources that we have in front of us, we can actually improve. So I want to take that ideology and actually apply it to objections, because I think objections is, again, one of the reasons why we lose a lot of sales. We never actually foster a strong relationship, is because we're too psyched out a lot about sales objections in themselves. Whereas if we simply change the way that we look at sales objections as a whole, and instead see them, instead of as a form of a rejection, as a form of buying, right? Like it's an interest to buy. And let me share with you, is because with sales objections, typically, depending on when they happen in the sales process, it is typically brought upon by us. If you've watched a lot of the content on Sales Remastered, whether it was on YouTube or Facebook, you're going to notice that I'm a believer of being proactive, of course, but also making noise in a different way. And part of that message is actually delivering your message in a way where it actually dismantles the guard and handles the objection before it even happens. And so for those of you who've already went to salesremastered.com and downloaded a copy of the sales script, I'll leave a link below the video. You'll know that it's actually crafted in a way to where it postpones the objections. And I think there's an art to that, because typically when we engage into a sales conversation, one of the main ways that we open up the door for objections is we actually ask the prospect, how can I help you? Or, what are you looking to do today? And ultimately what that does is it begins the process of opening objections. And if we get caught up too early in the conversation with objections, we're going to find ourselves not actually being able to convey the message and finding out how to truly serve value to that person we're engaging with. And if we can't serve value, it's because we don't have their compliance, and we can't have their compliance unless we have their attention. Does that make sense? So first off, with today's live stream, I've actually asked around to my own sales floor of what the common sales objections that they encounter are. And typically it just depends on when you reach it, because you're going to reach some sales objections in the very first engagement, in the very first conversation. And then you're going to reach certain objections towards the end, like when you're doing your sales pitch. And so I'm going to share with you my process flow in actually preparing and framing not only the initial sales conversation, but also framing the sales pitch, right? Because that's super important. I think that there is a way to frame the sales conversation in a way where they're going to be put on guard, or there's a way to frame it to where they're going to be all ears. And it's important that you put them in a position where they're all ears, because if they're not all ears, you don't have attention to sell to. And the same thing happens also with your sales pitch. If you're not transitioning to your sales pitch in the proper way, you're actually opening up the door to more sales objections that ultimately drain your time. It takes away from your ability to properly sell whoever the decision makers are. And here's a punchline to you. The sales objection, or the sales objections that you typically meet throughout the sales pitch, typically is because you don't have the decision maker there. And that's when you get the sales objection of, oh, I need to talk to my spouse, or you know what, let me go ahead and think about this. Let me go ahead and go over this information with my spouse, and we'll give you a call if we're interested in moving forward. And so the key is, though, is that you have to identify throughout your engagement who's actually the one that's making the decision within this buying decision, right? Or at the time of purchase. And what I've found throughout my years of experience, and I make it a habit to include that person, because today we have the technology to incorporate that person through a conference call. They don't necessarily need to be under the same roof or in the same location. And if you pay attention to a few things that I'm gonna cover in this live stream, you're gonna be able to position yourself more favorably to get through to that person and win that sale. Just one and done, right? And wouldn't that be better? Wouldn't that be awesome if you could figure out how to relay your message and be so efficient that you carry them from hello to okay, let's go and begin the process, all the way to congratulations, your loan is closed, in a more efficient way that doesn't give you as much resistance. Because when you meet resistance, that's a drain to your time. It's a drain to your mentality and your mindset, because you're constantly kind of pushing against this resistance. And so my punchline here is that when you identify what objections you're coming across most often, you are actually getting a sneak preview of how to improve your communication moving forward. And so let me give you an example. If you're constantly unable to complete a sales application, or complete the 1003, or complete the pre-qualification process, whatever side of the division you're in, whether it's purchase or refinance, what you're going to find is that you'll typically get the same objection around the same exact time inside your conversation. So pay attention, because every conversation is different. Some people, they just don't have objections, and those are unicorns. Those are awesome, right? They're just ready to buy, no questions asked. But unfortunately, those are very rare. And so what do you do for the majority? And the majority of them are going to have objections because they're initially on guard, but they wouldn't be on guard unless they were interested. And if you can get a sneak preview of what objections are about to come, then you can actually reformat your script, your verbiage, your wordplay in a way that actually addresses those objections before they even happen. And so, I'm going to start off with inbounds, because I believe inbounds is a common, form of lead generation that majority of the loan officers here are facing. Inbounds are aggregate leads. Inbounds are people who find you online and they're calling in to inquire. And then we'll transition over to outbound, because I believe outbound is probably the strongest lead source that you can find in today's market, because they're simply not shopping. They're, typically the leads that you encounter when you're doing an outbound are those who are not necessarily in the market. But if you format your wordplay in a covert, effective way, you can put them in the market, and they're not necessarily in the mindset of comparing. So it's a very strong skill set to have if you know how to properly do outbound origination. And then we're going to transition over to the common objections you get when you do your sales pitch. And I'm going to share with you inside this live stream the perfect way to transition from sales conversation into a sales pitch. And here's a hint. It's you don't do them at the same time. There's a lot of loan officers out there that want to jump into the hype of, hey, I'm a one call closer, I'm a one and done type of LO, and at the same time you're just kind of setting yourself up for a higher chance to fail, and ultimately you'll actually burn your time that way, and you'll set yourself on this negative momentum that I want to help you avoid, because the market's already kind of giving us enough challenge as is. But starting off with inbound origination. When you get a, let's say an aggregate lead or lower my bills lead or any type of internet inquiry, typically what happens are these prospects, they're not expecting that right when they hit submit, their phone's going to blow up. They're going to receive multiple emails. And depending on the strength of your company, you're either going to be the first lender to respond and connect with them, or you're going to end up being the last. And I need you to have the empathy to understand this, because it's all about your positioning in terms of how you play this sales game. I've said it before that the sales game is a game of chess. It's not checkers, where I think a lot of our competitors are trying to play checkers. They're trying to one up the competition. They're trying to hop over the competition. Whereas if you identify the sales game as chess, it's really all about being proactive in positioning, and you're starting your engagement this way. Let me show you how. So the sales script, if you guys have not downloaded it, I strongly recommend that you go to SalesRemastered.com, go to the bottom of the website and request a free copy. Use your primary email address though. Don't use your work email, because your work domain, your security filter is going to kick it back, or it's going to get quarantined. You're never going to get it. So use your primary personal email, the email that you get on your phone. And when you download a copy of the sales script, I share with you the reason why it's worded in that way is because it immediately puts you in a driver's seat. And if you're not in a driver's seat, then you're simply going to be driven by the prospect, and the prospect doesn't know where you guys are going. They're not going to know anything to do besides give you every single objection under the sun as to what they want, right? And so typically, let me give you an example. When we go into a sales conversation, one of the most common questions that we do after introduction is, how can I help you today? And what that does is it ultimately puts them in control. And in a sales conversation, the one who's asking the most questions, or the one who's asking the questions, is the one who's in control. And when we give them back the microphone by saying, how can I help you today? And we get caught off guard mysteriously, even though it happens every single time, when they answer, yeah, I'm just looking for your lowest rate, or I'm just looking for the lowest cost loan. The reason why this sets us up for failure is because our common response is, okay, well, what do you have now? Or what's your rate right now? And in a market just like the one we're in today, when we're in a higher rate market, if the second that we hear a lower rate than what's available on today's rate sheet is the second we start to go down this rabbit hole that puts us in a position where we're not gonna sell, because our brains work mysteriously, right? Our brains work in a way where we want to go along the path of least resistance. And that sometimes means that when we hear the first objection of someone saying, oh, well, I got a 2.5% 15-year fix, or I got a 3.5 30-year fix, we're already trying to cancel out the noise and say, okay, when we justify, okay, this person's never going to buy, they're not going to like today's rate, and we lose our confidence in going into the engagement because we've already convinced ourselves that they're simply not going to buy, or they're not going to want whatever it is we're serving today. And something happens with when your mindset is in that mode, your tonality, your delivery, your demeanor changes. You start finding other things to do that are more important, and then you begin to rush the conversation. And I promise you this is true. One of the things that I do in my job is I have to listen to phone calls to help coach my loan officers. And fortunately, for the loan officers who are on my team who are watching, fortunately, I'm blessed to hustle alongside with the number one team in the company. And I take pride in actually originating with them. So I'm in the trenches with them. I'm selling and originating loans. I'm closing loans. I'm doing this exact same process that I'm going to share with you and outline with you in this live stream. So going back to that initial question, what is an alternative? Instead of introducing yourself and saying, hey, how can I help you? One of the most effective ways is introduce yourself, but let them know a few things. Number one is you want to let them know that you're authorized to provide the information that they need. And the reason why it's worded that way is because you position yourself as the authority. You position yourself as the person they need to talk to by simply saying, I am authorized to provide you with the information that you need. Not only that, but I word it in a way where it's the information you need, right? And then I go covert on them and I say, well, before we begin, I'm going to ask a few basic questions just to make sure I can even complete this call. If I can help you, I'm going to show you exactly what I could do. If I cannot, I'm going to point you in the right direction. And what that does is basically lets them know that they're not going to be sold to, that it's going to be a quick conversation. I'm not going to waste their time, because ultimately that's why prospects give you the objection, is they're trying to protect their time. They don't want to be spent being pitched the entire time, right? But more importantly, you're noticing that it's worded in a way where it's a win-win. So if I can't help them, I'm going to point them in the right direction. Does that make sense? If I can help them, I'm going to show them exactly what I can do for them. And so that's all they ultimately want. But what that does is it keeps you in the driver's seat so you can engage in your conversation. And so you might be like, yo, but D, how do I follow up on that? Well, what you follow up on is you have to understand that the sales application should ultimately be a conversation. It shouldn't be an application. If you listen to a majority of the loan officers, and this might be your method right now, and if it is, it's okay. You probably just didn't know any better. Fortunately, you found at Sales Remastered, and fortunately, you got these resources to help you get better. And that's exactly what I'm gonna do for you today. So what you may hear is that when other loan officers do a 1003 or an application, it's an interrogation. Meaning that it's question after question in specific order, like page 1 of the 1003, page 2 of the 1003, page 3. And when we go through an interrogation as a consumer, just taking a step back, us as a consumer, when we're going through an interrogation, we know we're kind of in a process. And this is what sprouts up the objection of, hey, wait. Before I give you any information, right? I don't want to do an application. I don't want to commit. I'm just shopping. Do you ever hear that? And it's insight of how you're delivering your message and how you're being conveyed within that conversation. And so how do you beat that? How do you combat that? You combat that by making it a casual conversation. You can extract most of the information you really need, all the leverage that you really do need, by being covert and making it into an application. So there's a way of saying the property is your primary. What do you think the value of your home is? When's the last time you refinanced? You know, these are all just interrogative questions where you can make it into a conversation like, okay, Jim, the property we're going to talk about today on Memory Lane, this is your primary home, right? Got it. And when was the last time you applied for a refinance or at least looked at your credit report? And what this does is it gives you an idea if they're shopping, right? Or the last time they refinance. It answers so much, but it gives me the insight of where they're at mentally. And when I say there, I'm talking about the prospect. And so if they tell me like, oh yeah, I've been applying for the last 2 months, well, that gives me a red flag that something's wrong. How come you haven't completed the refinance, right? Or they might say, oh, I just did an inquiry. Last time I looked at my credit was this time last year. Well, then it gives me an opportunity to then ask them more questions. Okay, cool. If you appraised your property today, what do you think the house would come in at? And then this give them an idea of, again, it's just a conversation where I'm just saying, what's the estimated value of the property? We're actually saying, if you appraised your home today, what do you think the value would be? And ultimately what you're doing is finding out how much research they know. And if they say they don't know, then this positions you as the expert, because you can then follow up and say, you know what, no worries. I actually have this real neat report in my system. It's going to show you what local properties are selling for right now. And on this report, it's pretty cool because it actually tells you the school rating of your school district in case that's important. But anyways, I'll make sure to email that to you so that way at least you know what your property would appraise for if you did an appraisal today. But besides that, are you in the midst of any construction on the home, like any projects? Like is there any open walls in the house? And what you're doing is you're finding what ultimate red flags can pop up, because a lot of people, they'll do applications when they're in the midst of doing construction on their home, and this ultimately creates fires in the midst of the process. And so the goal is really, you're being proactive by kind of figuring out what the red flags are, but it's coming off in a way where you're going straight to the bare bones. And the bare bones of a loan, right, is you have to understand the value, the credit, the capacity, and also title, right? And so another question about title is like, hey, do you have outside of the mortgage, are there any other liens on your home, like an equity line of credit or a hero or PACE lien, which are basically like solar panels or home improvement loans? And these are things that are not necessarily caught up front until you go through the process. And so if you find out how to be proactive in a way where you can kind of pinpoint these red flags, not only will you save yourself time, but you're also going to position yourself to get an answer to that, or position yourself as the professional to consult them the answer to that. Does that make sense? So another thing, and I'll dive into a little bit about outbound. Outbound origination, similar thing, right? Like outbound origination, when you're calling out to people, typically how most loan officers call out to people is they do it in a way that opens up the door for objections. And it's all in the wording, I promise you. And inside the sales script at SalesRemastered.com, at the bottom of the website, when you request a copy of your sales script, download it today, put in your personal email, and I give you an outbound sales script, a perfect outbound sales script. And I say perfect because it's formatted in a way just like the inbound, where it takes control, it builds curiosity, and you get their attention. But typically the sales agent will sound like this on an outbound call. hey, my name is Daniel. It's a great day at my company. I'm just giving you a call to check in to see if you're in the market, if you're interested in any cash out, debt consolidation, if you want to, refinance or maybe shorten your term. And ultimately what's that's doing is it's fishing. Right. But the problem with that is that when you're fishing and you kind of sound like a commercial, you sound like an advertisement. And if you really think about it, become empathetic, when we as consumers or just humans in general, when we get advertised to or when we hear pitches or offers, we treat them like commercials, right? And so we're quickly turned off and we either fast forward it to when the show starts or we just change the channel. And so mentally, our prospects are doing the same thing if we decide to word it that way. But instead, a more effective alternative would be like, hey, Jim, this is Daniel. I just sent you over an email. It's with regards to your property on Memory Lane. It's important that we confirm that you did receive it because it's a real neat report. We're actually just giving you a quick follow-up call because you had talked to us about a year ago, and we're pretty vetted within your area. So we want to inform you of the recent developments that have taken place in your area, such as property values, this new tax reform that's rolled out this year, and also the changes within the school district rating, in case that's important. Anyway, it's inside your email. So, let me know that you got it. And then they're going to be like, well, how did you get my email? And again, you're telling them that you talked to them before, right? But ultimately, when they say yes, go ahead and send it to me, or okay, cool, thank you, that becomes your bridge to then open up the conversation and even further. And this is how you say, okay, I'm going to go ahead and send it out. And you know what? Before I do, let me go ahead and tailor it for you. The property that I'm sending it out, it's going to basically be for your primary residence. I know at the time that you opened up your loan, you had about $340,000 as a balance. Is there anything that's changed? Like, did you ever, were you guys ever considering like shortening the term or maybe improving the payment on it? Because I saw that it's an FHA, and how you know this is because you're not doing blind calls outbound, right? You're either doing outbound calls to past applications, past leads you never converted, or you're doing some sort of recon, some sort of research on that lead. The best way to position yourself to win an outbound lead is if you understand who you're talking to. So if you understand you're talking to people right now, like a good piece of information would be people who were in FHA loans, because the growth of the equity enables them to now remove mortgage insurance. Now, here's the thing. You might be thinking like, yo, but D, these people got like 3.5, bro. They got like 3.25. Well, technically they don't, because when you add their note rate plus their MI rate, you become the educator and say, yeah, well, you don't necessarily got 3.5. If you add your 0.85, or depending when they open their FHA loan, it could be all the way up to 1.35 in some cases. So you want to do research on that, right? So actually, technically, Jim, your rate's not 3.5. If you add in your MI, you're actually at 4.5, or you're actually at 5 1/8, depending again where their MI is. And how you do this is you basically add their FHA note rate to their mortgage insurance premium rate. But the reason why it works is because you're not calling to pitch. You're not calling to offer. You're actually calling to give them updates. Updates are more enticing. They build more curiosity, but more importantly, there's less friction there, because who doesn't want an update, right? We all want updates. We are wired for updates. This is why people love alerts. They love software updates. Like, these are just things that we're acceptable to, and we've kind of been wired in a way to look at as an update as basically getting on the same page, right? It's like my system won't work or won't be compatible until I do this update. Ooh, I want this update. And so we're naturally looking at that topic as something that we're inviting. So pay attention to that. And then finally, going into from sales conversation to pitch, typically how that's being transitioned right now is sales agents are saying, okay, I'm going to go and put the numbers together. I'm going to give you a call at about 5 o'clock or 3 o'clock, or even worse yet, when will you have a few minutes? I'll put the numbers together and I'll give you a call back with a few options. The problem with that is when you allow them to set the time, you're gonna put yourself in a position where they're going to think of the time that they have only 5 minutes available. The worst thing you could do is pitch them when they're going to be in a rush, because their focus is not on you. Another thing is that you want to watch out for is that if they tell you the time, most likely it's going to be a time that's not going to involve the other party. In most cases, the person you're talking to, they're the gatekeeper, they're the guard, right? Like I'm married. For those of you who are married, sometimes in a relationship or in a partnership, you have someone who's the gatekeeper. So they become kind of the filter. They become the person who vets out the company that they'll ultimately consider. But typically that gatekeeper is not the decision maker. The decision maker is the one who handles the finances. The decision maker is the one who actually sends out the bills at the end of the month, because it's the decision maker that's going to feel the emotional tie to the numbers that you're going to share. So it's important that they're there. So an alternative in saying, hey, when do you have a few minutes to go over some options? Don't word it that way. Just let them know and say, hey, I'm going to go and put the information together. I'm going to email it to your Gmail account. And if anything stops me from sending it out to you, I'll give you a call. Right? That, because less friction there. And ultimately what you do before you give them a call is you're paying attention to their time zone. In the conversation, you should have extracted some piece of information to figure out if the finance holder or the CFO in the company is the homemaker, right? Is maybe the wife. Or maybe it's their partner who also gets off work and typically is home at like 6 o'clock. And how do you ask that without being, so open and saying, hey, I'm gonna pitch you at 6 o'clock? What you do is say, you use your consent. You use the way to consent. Like, hey, I'm gonna go and prepare the information. I'll give you a call if I run into any issues on sending it out. But I need you to give consent in order to deliver it. Otherwise, you're gonna have to wait for it to come in the mail. And I don't want to send you 150 pages that are just gonna sit on your dining room table. So here, I'll send you a consent request. When will you be home, or when will your wife also be home? Because she needs to give consent too, right? And then you might be like, yo, but D, what if the wife's not on the application? No worries. You could still say, I need both of you guys to consent. You could still put it in that way. They're not going to know unless you tell them. Does that make sense? So you can find out like, oh yeah, I'm usually at home at my home computer, and you can open it up that way. I need you to give consent from your home computer, or I need you to give consent before I can deliver the information. When will you be home and your wife be home? And that's a good way to figure out when both parties are going to be there. And again, he could be en route, or she can be en route to go home. The other party can be en route to go home. And all you got to do is conference call them together. But if you consider that you can catch them en route home, they're in their car, they're sitting in traffic, you're on the Bluetooth, you got undivided attention. And that's probably the best way to position your sales pitch. But when you transition, you don't say, hey, I'm gonna put some options together. I'll give you a call with those options, because you're already planting the seed that that's going to be a pitch. You're planting the seed that it's just going to be something they could say yes or no to. Instead, word it in a way where you're saying, hey, I'm going to go and release the information to your Gmail account. I do need your consent. If I come across anything that's stopping me in sending it out, I'll give you a call. And ultimately, that call that you're giving them is your pitch, but they're not forwarding you to voicemail because they don't think it's a pitch. They actually say, oh, you know what? D said he was going to call me if anything stopped him from sending out the information, and I need the information, which is another thing, is that when you set up your pitch, you can't be selling it on the first call. You can't even allude to the fact that you know what rates they're going to give, and they're going to pressure you. They're going to say, hey, you know what? Can you just tell me what the interest rate is? Yeah, I actually am. That's the information I'm going to put together. That's how you overcome it, because usually those are the objections you have, right? So I know that it's taken about 28 minutes and we're going into this a little bit deep. I do have a list of objections that I'm going to quickly cover with you guys, because I think that this will serve a huge amount of value. If you guys want a more in-depth coverage of sales objections, you guys got to really look at the course. I got 2 courses. One's called the Banker Close, and the other one's called the Banker Formula to 6 Figures. The Banker Formula to 6 Figures, the only difference between the two is the formula actually has the close within it, but the formula gives you other insight in depth of how to set up your own origination process system, how to communicate with support roles. There's a lot of content within the Banker Formula to 6 Figures. So you might be wondering, like, which one do I choose? Well, if you want to have the full spectrum of information, including bonus modules that go over every single objection, gives you clean, precise rebuttals on how to use those objections, invest in yourself and check out the Banker's Formula to 6 Figures. And it's going to go in depth. It gives you the exact formula how to deliver the information, the exact formula of how to deliver your pitch in a way where it's not based on rate or fees. It's based on emotion. And I think that in itself is ultimately how you win your sales. You got to get them emotionally bought in. All right. So going over these quick objections that I've collected. a few of them, and these are coming from all kinds of loan officers at any skill level. And they shared with me the common objections that they encounter in going through the origination process and even in the sales process. And these objections that we're coming up with is, I'm going to shop around, or I need to speak to my spouse, or I want a no-cost loan. And these objections, those three that I just listed off to you, again, these are objections that typically come up if we ask them, how can we help them, right? And ultimately what happens when we ask them, how can we help them, and they spit out one of these objections, we naturally become defensive because we're wired to overcome objections. The whole idea of selling, in most loan officers' opinion, is I gotta convince them. I gotta grind and covertly persuade them, when it's not really that way. If you change your mindset and understand that sales is actually serving and helping, you're going to look at it in a different way. You're actually going to invite the objections. So if you're hearing these objections, and I'll list them off real quick, I'm going to shop around, which basically is fine. You want to say, good, you should. And this is how you ultimately overcome them, over that objection, because who doesn't say that? Like, okay, I want to go and shop around. Well, typically you'll get that objection if at the very beginning, like before you even go into your sales pitch, or before you go into your sales conversation, or you may get it at the very end after you pitch. So how do you overcome that? Well, in the conversation in itself, in the application, you're actually sprinkling seeds that answers that objection as a whole. And this is how you're basically saying that at the end of the day, we all go to the same wells for the water. And basically there are only 4 wells. It's Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, VA, and FHA. The only difference is most homeowners like to work with my company because I can only put in front of you what you qualify for, and I can only present to you benefit. If I can't benefit you, I couldn't put it together if I wanted to. And the reason for this is because of our reputation. Here, let me show you what I mean, and then go into the conversation, because who could fight that, right? But you're planting the seeds of saying that we all go to the same wells for the water because it's the truth, right? Like we have Fannie Mae programs just like other banks do. The bank across the street, the broker across the street, we're all going to Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, VA, or FHA. It's important you distinguish that somewhere in the conversation, because when it comes up, or if that objection comes up and says, hey, you know what, I want to shop around. No, yeah, absolutely. I completely respect that. But if you remember in our conversation, I was sharing with you, we all go to the same place. It's either Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, VA, or FHA. Ultimately, what you're doing and why most homeowners choose my company is because our relationship with these entities, it's stronger. It enables us to get around a lot of the red tape that creates us a long delay. And this is why our process is so quick. The reason why my company has so much positive reviews is because of our delivery. But more importantly, we're not giving you just numbers or information that may not possibly work out. I do a lot of the homework up front to protect your time and ensure that what you see is what you get. So I think most of my clients really come back to me, and I do repetitive business with my clients, and I have been over long term, is because of the appreciation they have with the transparency in working with me. And I think that's ultimately what you're shopping for, right? You're looking for that transparency, you're looking for the certainty, you're looking to ensure that you get the absolute best term. And if it is, then I'm going to show you how. Watch, check this out, and then bring them right back into the conversation. So that's ultimately how you defeat that. And then the objection of I needed to speak to my spouse. Again, how you transition into the pitch and how you went into the sales pitches, you've already kind of addressed it because you've been planting seeds of them needing to be present. But if that is killing a lot of your sales right now, like your pitches aren't being completed because they need to tell you, or they're always saying like, okay, I just need to run this by my spouse. That is a sign that you're not positioning your pitch in the proper way. So how do you fix it? You fix it by ensuring that they're there, right? You got to make sure that you're conforming to their time, because again, we're all about serving. You can't necessarily use the excuse of like, oh, I got to leave at 5. And if that's you, then, I get it. Some of us got kids, some of us got, responsibilities. But if you find yourself having to leave at 5 just to go sit in traffic for an hour and a half because you got to go watch This Is Us, or you can't miss Road Rules or whatever show that you want to TiVo, or you got to really think about what are you sacrificing that sales pitch for, right? Because you work all day to get to that sales pitch. So don't spend a lot of time preparing a sales pitch just to kind of wing it at the very end. And then another common objection is I want a no-cost loan. I've seen lower rates out there. The piece of mail I have says 2.75. It doesn't say this 4.75. And these are common objections that you can ultimately overcome throughout the message, but they're going to come up if you ask them, how can I help you? Right? Again, try to avoid that question, because us as consultants, us as drivers, we should already know what they want. And of course, it's a benefit, right? And unfortunately, us as loan officers, we sell money, and typically money is ultimately the solution to most problems. So that's our benefit. We give them solutions. So really think about that, change your perspective on that. But when they do come up and say, you know what, I want a no-cost loan, say, great, let me go and put that together for you. Or if they call you and for whatever reason they say, hey, I saw an advertisement at 2.5, and they're talking about some advertisement they remember last year, or they misunderstood the advertisement, and the advertisement was like on an ARM or an adjustable rate mortgage, and they're like, hey man, I want to know about that 3.25. Everything is always a green. Right? Never meet your prospects with resistance at the beginning, because you're not going to win. Bottom line, if someone called me right now and said, "Hey Daniel, I want to learn a little bit more about that 0.5% 30-year fixed rate." You know what my question? You know what my answer is? My answer is not like, "Oh, that's not available today. The market is up," or my response is not, "Well, where did you see that?" Right? That's resistance. You're telling them subconsciously that you don't have it. And so if they call me and say, "Hey Daniel, I'm looking for that 0.125 30-year fix," my response is, great, let me go and put that together for you. It's going to go to your email at blah, 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 right? Or it's going to be with regards to the property on Memory Lane. This is your primary home, right? This eludes the fact that I'm going to give them what they want, but I understand through empathy that not everyone understands my trade like I do. And I know this because I need to position myself as the consultant or the educator, the teacher, the authority to drive that conversation. So whatever mundane requests or outlandish requests that they give, oh, I want the no cost loan. Got it. Let me go and put that together for you. Right? And then you go into the conversation. So that's ultimately how you come across it. And then one common objection that we're getting right now, especially with the pickup and purchase business, is are the prospects saying, "Hey, you know what? I don't want to purchase right now. I just want to inquire." Right? Purchase. You want to say, "Good. Let me go and help you do that." Right? Again, don't meet with resistance, because typically as salesmen, we're waiting for the hint of resistance so we can overcome it with our rebuttals, because we're closers. You don't want to do that, right? You just want to say, okay, cool, let me go and help you do that. Or let me help you. Okay, got it. Let me go and put that together for you. And this basically just invites them to follow you. Does that make sense? That tonality gives the impression that they should follow you. And then another common objection is, I've never heard of your company. I would rather prefer to work with a local bank. Just like I had mentioned, when you say, hey, ultimately all lenders, any banks, any brokers, we ultimately go to the same wells for the same water. There's only 4 wells for the water. It's Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, VA, or FHA, or whatever analogy you want to use. I've heard one analogy saying, hey, we all use the same cow for the milk, right? And there's only 4 cows. Because you're putting it in a more easy to understand way, but that's ultimately how you overcome the, hey, I want to deal with a local lender. Say, yeah, no worries. I completely get that. It is a pretty important decision, but at least let me put together some information and show you why most homeowners in your county prefer to work with me, even though we're not across the street. Fortunately, technology has enabled us to get better prices everywhere, and this is why Amazon's so big. If you were only stuck to get all of your products from local stores, you may be paying more than you need to when you have an alternative source that technology like the internet or the telephone gives you. Right? But again, I completely respect your clause, but let me do this. Let me at least go ahead and show you by sending you the information to show you why most homeowners in your county elect us when it comes to doing a refinance or to get pre-qualified or to buy your next home. Does that make sense? So you're using that wording because you're giving them the sense that their community is already on the page, that they're one of the ones kind of, late to the party. So it's a little bit easier to digest when you say it that way. But notice how whenever I overcome an objection, I allude to the fact like, here, watch, let me show you. Or watch, here, let's do this. And it's me taking back the wheel. So I'm controlling that conversation. And then another one is, I don't feel comfortable giving you my social, or I don't want to pull my credit because my credit score, right? You might get this a lot towards the time where you have to do the application. And it really comes down to how you're asking, right? Like a lot of people will say, okay, what I'm going to do is request a copy of your credit report. What's your social security number? You're actually framing it up for resistance, right? Whereas you can actually plant seeds and say, okay, throughout the conversation, say, when you get a little bit closer to the credit pool, and say, you know what, when I go over your credit report, I'm going to show you what the comments are that the credit bureaus are giving. Now, this entices them because they're going to build curiosity to want to know what's on the credit report. And you should be going over what the comments that the credit bureaus are giving, because it now opens up the gate for cash out. Or if they're trying to buy a home, it opens up the gate of what they need to do in order to position themselves to get the best deal at the time they open up escrow. But more importantly, you're actually building the curiosity, because now they want it and you become that bridge to get that answer. But if they say, you know what, I don't want to pull my credit, I just have my credit report pulled, then you say, yeah, no worries. When it comes to a mortgage, credit bureaus understand that your credit score is actually based on how well you manage your credit. So the credit bureaus are not going to hold you to the first company that pulls your credit, because they want you to manage your credit. So if the first company that pulled your credit was a high cost lender, of course, that's going to put you at more risk to not manage your credit well. So what I've found is that these credit bureaus, they actually enable you a 30 to 45 day grace period. When you do an inquiry for a mortgage, you have 30 to 45 days to have unlimited inquiries as long as it's a mortgage. Now, don't go ahead and start applying for credit cards, cell phones, life insurance, and car loans, because those are different inquiries. But if another lender did it, then you're okay. You got 30 days. It's your right as a consumer to make sure you're getting the best deal. And I'm going to show you how. Watch, check this out. And then you go back into the conversation. That makes sense? Some other ones was not knowing who you are, questioning the legitimacy of the advertisement. Again, it has to do with the reputation of the organization, and you handle it in a way where you're actually saying, yeah, no worries. Let me show you why most homeowners in your community, and hopefully their county, right? Like Orange County, like most homeowners in Orange County, they actually choose us, and you're basically saying things that they relate to. You're saying things that they know, right? And that's not just coming from a biased opinion. They feel that their community is doing it. And so if someone listed off your city, like, oh yeah, every homeowner knows in your city about this program. You don't know about it? Oh man, let me show you. Watch, check this out. And then you guide them back into that conversation. Another one is, I'm waiting to hear back from my lender or servicer. Again, you don't want to meet it with resistance. Well, what are they offering you? Did they give you an LE? Do you have a locked LE? You don't want to come off as a challenge. You actually want to say, great, that's awesome. Let me show you, just so that way you can have a side-by-side, why most homeowners in your county actually prefer us. Now, I understand that your servicer is probably a little bit easier because you know them, but let me show you why most homeowners in Orange County choose to go with us, and it's because of our relationship. You see, your servicer or that lender, we all go to the same cow for the same milk, and there's only 4 cows. There's Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, VA, or FHA, or whatever analogy you choose to use. And then another one is, why can't you just give me your rate? This happens a lot, and I'll end it on this one. And again, if you want to know more about objections, because I know I'm going on about 40 minutes into this training session. It's only been 30. It's only set for 30. So I appreciate you guys. If you're still here, comment. Let me know you guys are here. Let me know if this is any value. What's up, Victoria, Kevin, Elmer, Brian, George, Trey, Javier. Thank you guys. I appreciate you guys for being here. Brian, thank you guys. Comment. Let me know what your takeaway was. And if you guys catch this on a replay, leave your comments. Let me know what you found to be most useful, and I'll be more than happy to create some content that you can find on YouTube and also Facebook. But I want to leave you guys on this. There's the objection of, why can't you just give me your rate? One of my enrolling students, his name is Aaron, and he called me the other day. And he was like, hey man, I came across this one person, and they just were not being compliant. They were actually rude. It's almost like they were being rude on purpose. And he wanted to know what my insight was on how to overcome that. Like, is there a strategy to get over someone who just doesn't comply? Like, it feels like the prospect just goes above and beyond to try and be rude, right? And so one of my first recommendations is that you have to be empathetic, and you need to understand that sometimes it's not necessarily them, it's just the way they're built. So some people, like for example, of an older crowd, if they get a sense you're young, their authoritative figure as a parent, or just kind of your old school, they grew up in a different era, they're gonna try to flex on you. And the way they flex on you is to be rude and try to bully you. But ultimately, that's just kind of smoking mirrors. It's their defense mechanism. And sometimes it's culture, right? Sometimes culture is the primary reason. So be empathetic to what kind of person you're talking to in order to better engage with that person. And sometimes they may have a military background. They might be a police officer, or some sort of occupation or background that naturally puts them in an authoritative state. So they're used to driving the conversation. They're used to giving authority. Some managers even, or VPs or CEOs, they naturally kind of give off this aura of like, I'm in charge, and we can't fight that, right? The worst thing you could do is take it personally as if you did something wrong. Understand that that's just their primary form of communication. And so the key is, though, that you just have to identify it and kind of adapt, mold to their primary communication. So if you feel that, for example, that they're doing it because they like authority and they're used to giving orders, or they're the sergeant of the police force and they're just used to barking orders, then just comply, right? Like, oh no, I completely understand it. Don't over talk them, rephrase the way you ask for things, like, hey, may I? Right? This is giving them the impression that they're holding control. And that's typically all they want, because that's where they feel safe. That's where they feel most comfortable, right? But a lot of times you're going to come across this objection of like, hey man, why can't you just give me your rate? The best way to handle that is to say, that's exactly what I'm going to do. You see, there are a lot of companies out there that's just going to give you a rate, but that's just an advertisement. If you want something very vague, you have commercials, there's ads that you could pull up online all day long. But here's the thing, the only way I operate is I give you information that's applicable to you. So I get that you may be in a rush, but at the same time, if you're in a rush just looking for general information, you're in a rush to find general information. I want to help you protect your valuable time, and the way that I've done this for all my clients, and the reason why most homeowners in your county choose to work with me, is because of my transparency, meaning I can only put in front of you what you qualify for. Here's the upside, is that the information I'm giving to you is not an advertisement, boo-boo. This is all for you. It's designed for you. If you want to know exactly what you qualify for, that's exactly what I'm doing. So here, this is what I'm going to do. Watch, I'll show you. And then go right back into the conversation. Does that make sense? So you battle it down and get leveled with them, but remind them that that's what you're doing to begin with. And say, no, I just need an interest rate. Okay, got it. I'll be just about as vague and general as those advertisements you see. I got programs that go all the way down to 3%, and I got some programs that go all the way up to the high fives. Again, what you want to know is what applies to you. Otherwise, this is just general research. You see, the only thing I can put in front of you is what you actually qualify for. And it's because of our relationship with Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, VA, FHA. The reason why we have so many clients within your community is because we serve value. Let me show you why they choose us. Let me show you how to get the information that you want. And that's exactly how you combat those objections. So I appreciate you guys' time. I know we're running about 50 minutes into this live stream, and I'm excited, man. The university is growing tremendously. More and more students are actually enrolling, and all I'm doing is I'm just taking that and investing it back into the course so I could deliver more value. I could deliver better audio. I could deliver better screenshots, right? I study my craft, and I study the art of delivering value because I'm building a brand here. So if you found value here, please comment on the actual videos. Comment on all the future videos that I put up. It helps me with the engagement, the algorithm that YouTube or Facebook or Instagram has now. It's not likes, it's engagement. And so that's why I'm always asking you to please comment, even if it's just an emoji. Just engage with the content. But if it's a question that you have, or it's a timestamp of your favorite episode, know that I appreciate it. Know that I read every single one. And one of the most common responses I get is like, "Oh man, you're so cool. You responded." Of course I respond. This is my art. This is my craft. I'm putting everything that I have in making sure that I'm making the time to deliver the absolute most value that I can give. And I hope that you, for investing time to study your craft, walk away with the reward of knowing that there is a solution to the grind that you face every single day. And I hope that I show you not only the tools to help elevate your game, but also your income, your production, your position, right? Like, get yourself a promotion, provide for your family, give yourself the experience that you deserve, because we're all trying to climb together, right? So think about someone who else can benefit from this video or this live stream. Forward it over to them. If you have not yet downloaded a copy of the sales script, I invite you, go check out salesremastered.com. At the bottom of the website, there's this opt-in box that allows you to request a sales script for free. And when it comes time and when you're financially in a position where you can invest in yourself, if you want to fast track yourself to the top, if you want to put yourself in a position where you're like, you know what, D, you know what, I just want the exact formula of how to kill it in this industry. I want to know exactly how to shoot myself to the top. And you'll have that answer in the Banker's Formula to Six Figures. So I appreciate all you guys' time. Have a great and blessed day. And I will see you guys on the next live stream. Later, guys.